Hello, Psych250 students. We're on to Schizophrenia Spectrum Disorders, Chapter 11. This covers quite a bit. Schizophrenia, for example, only represents 1% of the world's population. So if we have 100 people in a room, only one, your professor, would be probably diagnosed with schizophrenia. However, even though it's 1%, it affects so much of the family, of the community, to the world at large. That's a pretty serious form of mental illness. Now, two key ingredients of schizophrenia are hallucinations and delusions. Delusions are false beliefs. Sometimes I get students say, I'm going to get an A, and they don't study it. It's sort of delusional type. That's not what I mean. I mean, these are pretty supernatural false beliefs. And then you have hallucinations. Seeing things that other people can't see, hearing things other people can't hear, etc. Take a look at this image. Shout it out as soon as you see something. What do you see? Can you see the dog? Some people think it's a Dalmatian. There's the dog's ear, snout, collar, one leg, another leg, another leg. There's the torso of the dog. It's kind of bending down, sniffing something, as dogs often do. Now, just because some of you saw it, some of you didn't, doesn't mean that you're suffering from a possible hallucination because you saw things that other people didn't. It was just a matter of perception, right? Let me give an example how this happened to me. A couple years back, I dropped off my son for his swim practice, and on a street intersection in Irvine, specifically the corner of Walnut and Culver, I was about to make a right-hand turn to head back home before I would just make a round trip and pick him up from swim practice. Well, just like the old-time movies, I saw an old prospector with a couple of mules. I mean, the mules were packed like you would expect in an old Western, and the guy was dressed like an old prospector. And I just kind of rubbed my eyes and I looked around to the other cars to see if they're noticing what's going on here. Like, isn't anybody seeing what I'm seeing? And I didn't see anybody look astonished as I was. I'm pretty sure I saw what was real, but it was almost like from a different time period. Maybe there was a tear in the time continuum. I guess I get that from too many movies, right? So I drove home and I was puzzled. It's like, what the fudge just happened? So I got online to one of my only friends, Miss Google, and I found out that what I experienced was in fact not a hallucination. And here's the fella. He walks around the state of California, from the very northernest part to the very southernest part. And his mission, excuse me, is just to educate people about the way things used to be. He used to have 3 meals, but now he's down to 2. He doesn't really ask for money, but if you offer him money, he'll use it to feed the mules and take care of them. He's just doing what he wants to do. So what I saw was real, right? If there was no article about this man, then I kind of would have been a little bit worried what I saw. I read up on him, and apparently, in some towns, the police stop him and they take pictures with him. In other towns, they just shoo him on, right? So it really depends. I had another experience with somebody unusual. Near my house in Irvine, there is an Albertsons. I wouldn't go there too often. I'm the house cleaner of the family, so my wife usually does the shopping and the cooking, right? On one occasion, my sister-in-law from San Diego came for a visit, and she said she absolutely loves our neighborhood because she gets to run up and down and see beautiful sights, and it's just the neighborhood to me, but it's different from her, so that's why I think she just likes it more, because she's used to running down her streets. She came back after her early morning run, And she said, something's going on over there at Albertsons. They got all kinds of police tape. They got a big police van there, like a crime scene van. And of course, I could never mind my own business, right? I had to go, and I guess that's part of my background, right? But I just had to go and investigate. And so I went down there, and sure enough, she was right. You couldn't even get to the Albertsons. It was all blocked off with police tape. And so I went to the Rite Aid that was on the corner there. And I walked in and I started asking people, because again, curiosity, hey, what happened over there? And somebody said, I heard there was some type of a knife attack or something. And the first thing I thought of was, oh my goodness, it's probably one of those, if I can't have you, nobody can have you, some deranged man, a love affair. The story started piling in my head. And it turned out to be a young man who actually bagged my groceries. He worked at Albertsons part-time. I remember one occasion he did bag my groceries and he was kind of talking to himself. And he wasn't wearing any headphones or anything like that, or on his phone that I could tell. He was just kind of mumbling to himself. And I just thought, hey, to each his own. And I just thought, how cool is that Albertson is working with maybe some folks who are mentally ill, but he did a good job bagging my stuff, and I thanked him. Well, on this particular occasion, he walked in. It was a hot summer day, and he was wearing a long black trench coat, kind of an unusual jacket to be wearing on such a hot day. Somebody who worked with him saw him in the parking lot and greeted him and made small talk with him. Then he walked into the store. The manager saw him and asked him, what are you doing here? And he opens up his jacket and pulls out a long sword. This is the man right here. Apparently, he was a fan of a television program, an ongoing series in which these swordmen would travel across time periods and fight each other, right? The name of the program escapes me at the moment, but he had a collection of swords that he bought at knife and sword shows and stores and ordered online and so forth. And one day he decided to come to work and brandish his sword. When he whipped out the sword, the manager asked him, what are you doing? And of course, he immediately starts swinging at customers, right? And unfortunately, he killed 2 former employees at the store. He wounded a few other individuals. Of course, there's a couple entrances to Albertsons, so people were running for their lives. Some customers took it upon themselves, very brave, to try to stop him, and so they used the carts to try to push him away. But these swords are pretty long, so it's pretty dangerous. The police arrived rather quickly, and they cornered him, and they told him to drop the sword. He didn't, and they shot, and he died. We later found out that this gentleman suffered from mental illness. And it was one of those situations where he had received help, he had received medication, he had gotten better. But sometimes when you take meds, they have side effects, and we don't really like to take medications. I have to take medications, and it's not fun, right? And sometimes when you feel better, you don't want to take it anymore. So I stopped taking the meds. And then who knows what happened? Maybe the voices came back. Maybe the paranoia came back. I do know that afterwards they put up a plaque, which is still there today, with the victims' names. And this tragedy occurred in 2016. They also, if you walk into the Albertsons, have cameras, so you can see who's coming and going. This story made the headlines, and Actually, it happened in 2012. I take that back. I took that picture in 2016. And it left its mark. Not all good, obviously, even on the people who were involved, who witnessed it. The police officer who had to shoot the individual. Not all police officers want to kill people, right? So it became a sensation, and unfortunately, that's what drives the media's perception of what mental illness is all about. They're all dangerous and they're all going to kill people. And by far, the number of people that are killed by other individuals, those individuals, the murderers, are not diagnosably mentally ill. There's something wrong with them, but they wouldn't classify under the DSM necessarily. My interest in schizophrenia began when a professor mentioned a book. The name of the book is called The Three Christs of Ypsilanti by Milton Rokeach. And Rokeach came up with an interesting experiment. He decided to get three men who all had delusions of grandeur, right? This belief that each one of them was Jesus Christ. And so he had them transferred to Ypsilanti State Hospital. Now, I happen to be going to school in Ypsilanti, so as soon as he mentioned the name of that book, I thought, is it the same Ypsilanti we're in right now? Which it was. He puts all three of them together in a room to see what would happen. And voila, it's an interesting book because it covers the dialogue of these three men. You have to read the book to find out what happens. If you meet somebody who seems like a danger to themselves or others, this is the application for a 72-hour hold. You must meet certain criteria. We can't just say, I don't like the way you look, so I'm going to make sure that you're hospitalized. You have rights. You have a right to refuse treatment. You have a right to treatment. In some cases, you can be put in a hospital against your will if you meet those criteria. And this must be done by a mental health professional. My life wasn't always that clean and easy. We've had a long history, as we've talked about before, of doing some pretty horrendous things. This is trephination, right? Probably somebody suffering from some form of hallucination. I've got a voice in my head, and so let's get it out, right? And of course, a number of those patients wind up perishing. Then we had a number of people throughout the years try to make some progress because we didn't have psychoactive substances to counteract the neurotransmitters. A lot of it was misunderstood. So when we look at schizophrenia today, we break them into four major categories as to what's happening. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really like a couple of the names of these categories. One of them is positive symptom, and the other one is negative symptoms. And I don't really like those names because positive sounds like it's good and negative sounds like it's bad, and none of them are really good. There's some psychomotor issues and some cognitive issues. So this illness, if you will, really affects a person's way of processing information. And sometimes they act out on what they're processing, and sometimes they withdraw. That's why positive symptoms are more interactive and negative are more inclusive, right? This can lead to some really disorganized thinking, some loose associations. I'm sure the Albertsons man, who I call him by that name, was very confused. Maybe he thought he was striking out against the villains from that television series. Sometimes their conversation doesn't make any sense at all. They have what's known as word salad. They start off saying a word or a sentence, and then it just scrambles into make-believe words. That's interesting to me because if you're talented and gifted, you can say words like shizzle, right? And if you're mentally ill, you can say the same words and people won't understand the word you're saying. Let's talk more about schizophrenia and related disorders next time.